The Google Pixel 4a is quite possibly one of the best phones of 2020. Hey s'mores, I'm Shannon Morse. Welcome to Morse Code. I do tech reviews and tutorials, so if you are looking for in-depth tech and gadget content, you have come to the right place. Today, we are checking out the long-awaited Pixel 4a from Google. I say long awaited because the final release kept getting pushed back, but it's official. We have one here, and I got mine as a gift from Google. This is from Team Pixel. The just black Pixel 4a released on August 20th. It cost $349. Now I will say, it would be fun if we had a rainbow of color options because obviously ya girl likes color, but this one is a muted color. It's fine. If you missed my unboxing, it does come with the phone, a SIM removal tool, Google's quick switch adapter, and an 18-watt charger with USB-C cable. Now, I just want to jump right into the review because this is a really interesting phone. On the front, you've got Gorilla Glass 3, and on the back, you have plastic, as you can tell. And the frame is also plastic as well. Now that means that you do get some fingerprints on the matte black back, but it is not as apparent as it would be on a glass-backed phone. The dimensions of this are relatively small. It's 144 millimeters by 69.4 by 8.2, and the weight is 143 grams, or if you're in the US, that's 5.04 ounces. It is a very small phone, and it's very, very lightweight as well. It feels small in the hand, but that does not necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I kind of miss being able to do tasks one-handed, and I can totally do that with this phone since premium phones nowadays are just so much bigger, so I can just flip around all my apps with one hand, and it's been a long time since I've been able to do that. As for ports, we've got USB-C. There's also a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on the top. I know, that's crazy. And there's also a single SIM slot. There is no SD card slot, but you do have your power and volume buttons all on the right side. Those buttons do feel really nice and durable. They aren't loose, they feel tactile, they feel clicky, and you do get a nice responsive click whenever you press down on them. I do get the impression that this phone would last a long time. It feels really durable, but I do also think that it would pick up lots of signs of use, like scratches and stuff like that, because of the plastic material. Unfortunately, there is no waterproofing on this phone, but there are dual stereo speakers. Now, I will say, if somebody told you that it has a mono speaker, they are very mistaken, and you will notice that will happen sometimes with reviews if somebody just reads the PR information because that was incorrect, and they don't actually double check with the physical phone. If they check with the physical phone, you would notice that it does have stereo speakers because you can literally hear them. So it does have stereo speakers, I can confirm. The display on this is very nice for such a good price point. It's an OLED model. It's 1080 by 2340 resolution with 443 pixels per inch, and it's got an 83.3% screen to body ratio. The total size on that is 5.81 inches, so it is, again, pretty small. Now, bezels are noticeably bigger around the edges, and the nits brightness on this is 670. Now, that is a lot lower than what I am used to with phones that are 4 times the price. I also noticed that the colors are more muted, and it's definitely dimmer, especially when you use it in those bright summer sunny days. Now, you can change the color contrast in the settings, so if you prefer boosted colors over Google's adaptive option, then you can change that, but you have to do it yourself. The aspect ratio of this phone is 19.5 by 9, and the corners are curved, and you can definitely tell given the bezels, but the screen itself is not, and that means that those side gestures that we've gotten used to with Google's most recent updates are really, really easy to do on this phone. You do also get that always on display, and your refresh rate with this phone is 60 Hertz. Now, I've mentioned this in previous phone reviews. If you come from a phone that is 90 or 120 Hertz, you will notice a noticeable difference. It will feel a bit jolting to switch back down to a lower refresh rate. But if that's what you are used to, it feels totally fine, and you can use 60 Hertz with absolutely no problems. People do give it a lot of flack, but given this is a $350 phone, 60 Hertz for a refresh rate is totally fine. As for the cameras on the back, You get a single camera. It's a 12.2 megapixel, f1.7 aperture, and that's a 27 millimeter wide angle lens. It's a 1.4 micrometer pixel size, and you can get up to 7 times digital zoom. However, I don't recommend using digital zoom because it never looks good, no matter what phone you are using. The features on this are also pretty comparable. You have HDR through Live HDR Plus, which Google has integrated into their app. There's panorama mode, there's night sight, astrophotography, which is the mode activated automatically in night sight if you're pointing this at the sky. There's portrait mode. You can also do RAWs and JPEGs on this phone, and you can do Google Lens, which is integrated in the default app. You also have your photosphere, slow-mo, and time lapses too. And a really awesome feature that's built into the camera app, and now I want it in like all my phones, which I kind of found on my own. There's this built-in leveler, so you know if you are taking your pictures crooked, which I always tend to do, so I really like that. I love that I don't have to edit them post-processing in Instagram before I post them. Now, I took my parents exploring around Colorado and I got to really test out the camera. They are iPhone users and my mom was so impressed with this camera's quality, but also because it's such an inexpensive phone. Even though it's a single rear camera, I found myself impressed with the quality too. Portraits are not 100% perfect, but they outperformed my S20 Plus on more than one occasion, and that's seriously saying something. My hair confused portrait mode more than once, but for short hair, it looked really good. Now, even though my hat is the same color as the background in some of these example photos, it was smart enough to comprehend that my hat should be in focus while the mountains behind me should not. I also got some beautiful HDR photos up near Breckenridge here in Colorado while the sun was kind of getting lower and behind some clouds in the early afternoon, and it was so pretty. The details that I got in the trees and the foreground were absolutely gorgeous, and the HDR was really helpful when I was also exploring Colorado Springs too. It helped bring out those details in the shadows or under my hat, for example, in my face, while still not overexposing the outdoor scenery around these cliff dwellings, and details were all clear and very excellent quality. Colors, like the photos of these gorgeous flowers that I found up in Breckenridge, they were so vibrant. And I love these photos that I got of Suki over at a bar patio where she was just hanging out with us one night. Her fur and her eyes are just so clear in these pictures. And even without portrait mode, you still get this nice aperture. This was actually without portrait mode turned on. Video recording is as you would expect. It looks really nice. The stabilization looks great, and you can record up to 4K at 30 FPS. You can also do 1080p at 30, 60, or 120. The front camera is a single punch-out hole. It's an 8 megapixels, so that design has changed a little bit from previous Pixel phones, and that's an f2.0 aperture, and it's 24 millimeters wide angle. Now that one is a 1.12 micrometer pixel size, and this one also has auto HDR, and it features portraits and night sight. You can also do video recording at 1080p at 30 FPS, so if you want to get some cute selfie videos, you can do so as well. I do prefer a wider lens myself on the front for group selfies, so this was not necessarily my preference because you couldn't get like a bunch of people in. Not that we're hanging out with a bunch of people right now, but in the future, one day, we will. But portrait mode was done really well, and it continued to bring out colorful scenes. I like that face retouching is also defaulted to off, but it's there if you want it. It's definitely there if you need it. Moving on to the internal specs, you've got only one single option, and that is for 128 gigs of storage, 6 gigs of RAM, and you've got a Qualcomm Snapdragon 730G, which is a little bit lower than what we have seen this year, and there's an Adreno 618. It is a zippy little phone, and it's pretty dang good at playing video games. For example, I got a 3D Mark test score, and this was my average, 2483, which ended up being better than the TCL 10 series phones, but it's nowhere near those 7,000 plus scores that you would get on the OnePlus 8 series phones. As far as gaming experience goes, I didn't have any lag. I was able to play all of my normal games without issue. I was able to use use AR in Pokemon Go, the updated AR, and I didn't have any problems with that. I didn't experience any processing problems in the games. Rarely, very rarely, would I notice a slight lag whenever I was switching between tasks, but this usually only happened upon the first boot up or when I restarted the phone. I didn't have any app crashes, I didn't have any freezing on the phone, even when doing some heavy processing. The user experience with Android 10 and with the Pixel 4a is awesome. You do get Android 10, it's vanilla, there's no additional bloatware, and it's my favorite kind of Android. The experience is very, very easy, so I think that this would be a great learner phone for an Android user because the updated operating system is just very natural to get around. It's intuitive. But some of the fun features that we saw introduced in the last couple of years are on the 4a too. So like you get Google Assistant, you get transcribing speech with the Recorder app, you get those improved live captions, which you can enable right through the volume button. Google Assistant is now activated with the gesture controls instead of squeezing, so it asks, "How can I help?" and it thinks I'm talking to it. Google Pay is also integrated in the power menu, so you can pay at some terminals with your phone, just like with Apple Pay. And that's really easy to access as well. You just hold down on the power button and then choose your credit card, which I'm not going to show you here. There's also a personal safety app that can detect if you are in a car crash, and that was something that I also saw in the Pixel 4 XL. Now, as far as security goes, and this is always something big for me, security updates on this are going to last for at least 3 years guaranteed. There is no face unlock. There is only a fingerprint reader, and you can do PIN as well if you want to. The fingerprint reader is on the back. It's rear mounted again, so they did bring that back. Now, I would prefer an in-screen sensor for my fingerprint, so I don't have to pick up the phone every single time I need to unlock it. I do prefer when it's just right on the front. It's much easier for me. But the sensor on the back is very, very quick, so you won't have any issues whenever you're trying to use it. The phone also comes with encryption enabled automatically, and it has that Titan M security chip, which is totally included, so you can use this phone as your security key with Google's Advanced Protection program. Now, something that a lot of people will find is a negative is that the 4a is only 4G, but a 5G version will be released as well. However, we don't have the details on that yet. There's also Wi-Fi 802.11, and that goes up all the way from ABGN to AC. You can do a hotspot, you can do Bluetooth 5.1, NFC, GPS, pretty much everything you expect in a 2020 phone except for 5G. Now, the audio quality on here is really nicely tuned. I like how they worked with the audio. It does have those dual speakers and it does have that headphone jack. Now, something I noticed, interestingly, is I hear a little bit more bass on this phone, on the 4a, than I do with my more expensive S20 Plus, which I was kind of comparing this to. I was also able to like rock out to Daft Punk music with no problems, Janelle Monáe, my usuals, Guardian of the Galaxy, that entire soundtrack, and I was able to hear the bass really well on this phone. And I love the fact that they included the headphone jack. Look, if you go to HackerCons and you absolutely 100% cannot enable Bluetooth while in those kind of environments, which you really shouldn't, then you would see the plus in a headphone jack. Now sure, it's a very small market of people that are going to HackerCons that might need a 3.5mm headphone jack so that they can disable Bluetooth. But that makes me immediately think that this would make a really great secondary burner device to take to DEF CON, especially since it's fully updated and it has that Titan M chip for security. All of these things are pluses. The battery in here is a 3140 milliampere hour, and you do get 18-watt fast charging. But unfortunately, there is no wireless charging on this phone whatsoever. So even though it has a smaller battery, I found that my screen on time, even when I was watching YouTube videos all day, it lasted quite a long time. I was pretty impressed, and it probably helps that it's a smaller screen, smaller resolution, less refresh rate, and it's also a lower nits brightness too. So there's a lot of things with the screen that are not going to drain the battery as fast, even though the battery is a lot smaller on this phone compared to some others at nearby price points. So I think it's got some pros and cons for the price. If you are going for a budget phone, you are going to lose some high-end components like wireless charging, waterproofing, a higher refresh rate, and extra camera lenses. So I really can't harp on the Pixel 4a that much for losing some of those features that I've gotten used to in $1,000 plus phones. For $350, those are things that I'm not going to expect to find in a phone of this quality. So I guess that would be the question, is do you need those for day-to-day usage? If you just want simplicity, then this is a no frills, high quality option that will probably last you a long time given you got all those security updates. I can absolutely recommend this phone, no question about it. It's easily one of my favorites for 2020, and for that price, you really can't go wrong with a Pixel 4a. Plus, you get those updates for 3 years. That's almost unheard of these days. I think it's one of the best phones of 2020, not because it can compete against the 1K phones, which obviously it can't, but because this is really raising the bar for sub $400 phones. I mean, the camera on here is just awesome. This proves that you can get an excellent camera and an excellent phone for $349 and not have to sacrifice security or sacrifice updates or sacrifice like a gorgeous portrait mode. I hope that you enjoyed my review of this phone. It was really, really fun to check it out, and it makes me think like there are so many people in my family who I could probably bring over to the dark side of Android by buying them a $350 phone for Christmas or something like that. And I could bring this with me to DEF CON. In fact, I probably will whenever we have our next convention. Now, if you enjoyed this and if you want to see more, if you want to support me, I do have Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links down below. I do have some new s'mores who are supporting me on Buy Me a Coffee. That includes Tech Odyssey, Jackson, Alex, and Kiki. And then on Patreon, I also have a few new patrons, Phil, Daniel, and Dan. So thank you so much to each and every one of you. You are amazing. I appreciate you so much. Comment below, let me know what is the one thing that you cannot live without in a phone. Thank you again to my s'mores for subscribing and watching. I'm Shannon Morse, and I will see you soon. Bye, y'all.